So now that we've seen some different ways of implementing a linked list, we're going to take a look at a few different practice problems involving linked lists. The first one that I have for you is the reverse list problem. So suppose that you're given a linked list of values, and your goal is to reverse that linked list. So what I mean by that is if your input looked like 1, 2, 3, it reverses so that the rear becomes the front and the front becomes the rear. So you would have now the value 3 followed by 2 followed by 1. So reversing the order of the linked list. I want you to find out how to do that given any sort of linked list. And when I say that, I'm specifically talking about a singly linked list because a doubly linked list is a fairly easy process to do this, right? Because we have pointers in both directions, we can simply just basically flip the head and the rear and we'd be able to iterate backwards, and that would give us a reversed version of the list itself. However, in a singly linked list, we only have pointers in one direction, so we have to be a bit more careful with our approach. So let's take a look at how this is generally going to work. For this problem, I'm going to create a function, which is going to be called reverse list. And it's going to take in the front or head of a linked list. We'll call this front just to be consistent with our terminology so far. So we'll call this front. And basically the main way that we're going to handle this is we're going to keep track of the previous, kind of like what we did in our singly linked list iterations. And we're going to iterate through the whole list that we're given. What we're going to do is we're basically going to store the value that comes after our current value. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set its pointer to next to the previous value that we saw. And then we move through to the next iteration. So basically what ends up happening, for instance, is when we get to 2, we set its next to be 1, which was its previous value. You see that I would just flip the pointer around so that this would now point in this direction. When we get to 3, we flip its pointer so that it points to the previous, which is 2. You'll see that that ends up flipping the direction of that pointer, and do you see that we end up getting a reversed list out of this, right? So that's generally the process that we're going to use. So it's really just 3 lines of code. The next value is front.next. The next value the front.next, right, is going to be equal to previous, right? And then previous is going to be equal to the front. So basically on each case, we're just updating this value. So front.next is going to be storing what comes next. We then move the next to be the previous value that we saw. Previous is going to become the current front to keep track of what we've seen previous. And then we just move the front forward to next. So front becomes next. And then from here, we just return back previous, which basically becomes the front of our list, because by the end of the iteration, we end up at this end value, and that becomes the actual front of our list going forward. So let me show you that this is actually working. If I create a new linked list and I do a few inserts to it, so I'm going to insert to the rear the values 1, the value 2, and the value 3. What we'll do is I'm just going to print out this value. So I'll do something like this. I'll say l.print. And then in order to reverse this, basically what we do is we say l.front equals reverse list, and we pass in our front value. Basically what this does is it changes the front of the linked list to be the result of this reversal, which will be a new node that indicates the front, and it links to other nodes inside of the sequence, right? So after we do this, we'll just go ahead and print this again and just see if it actually does reverse our list, right? So let's go ahead and run this. So I'll go right here. You'll see when we first run this, we get the values. Oh, sorry, there were some values inside of my node code here. Let me just remove out these prints so that they're not confusing us. There we go. You'll see here that we get 1, 2, 3, which is the list forwards, right? This is the result of these inserts. And then when we reverse the list, we see that we now get 3, 2, 1 as a result. So it actually did reverse out our list. So it looks like this works well for our particular use case. Final question for you. What is the time complexity of this? Well, we have to iterate the whole list in order to reverse it, right? So this generally is going to have an O(n) time complexity associated with it. So it's pretty good time complexity overall for this sort of problem. It allows us to be able to reverse this list in little code and little time. So this is a pretty good solution for our problem. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.